Hi everyone, my name is Rita Nunão. I'm part of corporate DreamDapps team. Today's segment is about Bitcoin, all you need to know, all of those details that you are not aware of. I will share it with you. And before we get started, subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss any segments like this.
DreamDapps. The dream is now.
So, a few years ago, a term began to be part of the daily life of those who live on the internet. It was Bitcoin. The general idea is that it's a coin and that it's worth a lot. After all, that's why it fell into the top of mind financial innovation worldwide. But what makes this coin so valuable? Who created it? If it does not physically exist, how can it have such a high value? How it's calculated? How does it came about? Are there other besides it? How did BTC increase more than 1,400 in 2017? It's following these questions that we believe Bitcoin is the currency of the future. The advantage range goes from security to freedom and zero tax, but in order to reach its current market value of almost $300 billion, more or less, it was a long walk indeed. The currency went through various instabilities. For example, the first Bitcoin came out on January 3rd in 2009. It was a few months after September 2008, the day of the stock market biggest downturn after the Great Depression. Although it was not the biggest crisis in the modern economy, the crisis of 2008 was large enough to put an end to solid institutions, such as banks, for example, that had to close the doors, taking with them many people who lost their money and when not the savings of a lifetime. In order to make things better, the US government, where the problem begins, of course, decided to inject no less than 700 billion of tax dollars directly into the economy. It was expected almost 17 trillion long-term and indirect, according to Forbes case study. By this time, you are thinking how good it is for the government to care about people and cover the damage of the crisis. Not so. Because if you are not one of the few people who can say that you are owner or shareholder of a bank, then you did not have much to celebrate with this emergency rescue plan. The proof of this is that in 2008, more than 800 million families were put away from their homes because they could not afford the mortgage. It's ironic, no? For banks that have speculated on other people's money and where the main culprits, the billion-dollar bailout for people, was debt enforcement. So of course this throws us a question. Why money value has to be governments and the big institutions' responsibility? Why is that responsibility cannot be taken care of by ordinary people, since it's they who turn money into day-to-day basis and produce profit? And this was exactly the initial and biggest premise of Bitcoin, according to Satoshi Nakamoto. He imagined a fair currency where transactions occur freely from person to person, all of which of course are registered in public and open on the internet for those who wish to follow them. But of course, this will propose the possibility of no fraud, no damage by malicious persons, and especially without government intermediation. So this guarantees a system free of fees, corruption, and without the risk that centralization brings with it, such as the 2008 bankruptcy and the immediate response to the banks. So The proposal was originally announced to the world on October 31st, in the same year of the crisis. But before we continue with the story of BTC, I remind a detail that I would like to share with you. It is not yet known who Satoshi is, whether if it's real or a fictitious name, and it's unknown even if it's a he, a she, or they, because the supposed creator was limited only to conversations in online forums and nothing else. Never showed his face, and after creating what would become Bitcoin and explaining how everything worked for those who proposed to help them in a job with a good meaning, a good purpose, Satoshi passed the Bitcoin.org registry, delivered the source codes to those that would continue, and disappeared in early 2010. Since then, many have been singled out as the real Satoshi, from encryption masters to virtual coin creators prior to Bitcoin, but all guesses were wrong or at least could not be proven. Currently, and after a few speculation, the latest and current creator of the coin is the Australian Craig Wright. And what qualified him to this position is that, in addition to being an IT brilliant genius, he developed the first online casino in the world, founded a company of virtual security and computer forensics, and a cryptocurrency company. So, whether is he or not, he's said to be very well, and since it's speculated that he has about 1 million bitcoins in his wallet. So imagine this, the fortune in today's values revolve around something like $17 billion. It's crazy. So now back to where we started. I'm sorry, I just want to share this fun fact with you. Returning to Bitcoin, for all we have seen so far, at least in theory, Satoshi had created an unbeatable system. With the transaction occurring point to point and without intermediaries, it cannot be controlled, taxed, or regulated. Think about it. If you are sending money to a person over the internet using traditional means, how would you do it? It would need to involve a third party, be it a bank, a credit card operator, or else PayPal. As usual, when we have a third party, we have the traditional tax that we have to pay. So after putting the system to work, Satoshi makes the first deal with Bitcoin Story on January 12th, I think, in 2009, sending 50 BTC to Hall Finney, one of the first to volunteer to help him with the currency programming. Until then, the currency had not even had a stipulated value, since its first quotation would happen only a few months later. And it was when the new Liberty standard estimated that $1 could buy just over 1,300 bitcoins. So now let's compare that today. 1,300 BTCs are equivalent to more than $22 million. So can you see the growth over the years? It's amazing. Therefore, of course, the great Bitcoin boom would still take a while to happen. Only on the beginning of January 2011, when Silk Road opens the door and adopts the BTC as the official currency of all operations there. And it seems that the marriage between Silk Road and virtual currency was perfect. It seemed that they had created one for the other. But if you never heard of Silk Road, I'll explain to you. Silk Road come up on the deep web, that hidden and dangerous internet, with the aim of marketing all sources of possible contraband, like guns, fake documents, even drugs. And to access deep web, you need a special browser which allows you to anonymous browsing, which certainly you want to do in case you are buying illicit things. But for the same reason of being unbreakable, Bitcoin happens to be used in great quantities in deep web, and its value shoot pretty fast. In 2012, Silk Road moved more than $22 million a year, all in Bitcoin and unfortunately all from illegal deals. At that time, the European Union had officialized the currency. BitInstant figured as the great market trader. The market value of Bitcoin in circulation had gone from $1 billion dollars, and the digital currency was already quoted in more than $10 a unit. So, this conjunction of factors was enough to draw banks' attention that had now relinquished this virtual currency, who is now an imminent problem to the system. So, of course, as you may now guess, the giants of financial market begin to squeeze and move a powerful lobby into the key sectors of the US government. The result was accurate, and in a short time, the FBI would close the siege on the Silk Road, ending all its activities in October 2013. Its founder, Ross Ulbricht, was identified, located, and arrested in 2014 as well. From then onwards, if you remember, it began a great media circus surrounding his trial. Bear with me on this one. Ross was arrested in California. The servers that hosted the Silk Road were out of the country, so they were governed by international law. Buyers and sellers in turn were from the most different parts of the world, so many that it would be impossible to list them. In the face of this evidence, it's pretty obvious why the trial occurs precisely in New York, more precisely in southern Manhattan. What do you think? I think it's for the simple reason that is there where Wall Street stands, the heart of the world banking system. Ross was not judged for drugs or weapons. Unfortunately, Ross was judged for fostering a system that challenged and began to bother large corporations. The sessions in the court had national repercussion, a great media monitoring that tried to pass only a message. Whoever messes with Bitcoin does not do well. That is so wrong, and that alone explains the life sentence he was convicted of. But as I say, the controversy surrounding the closure of the world's largest illicit service website, it only managed to get thousands of people to hear about it and get interested in it. Another interesting thing in this issue is that Bitcoin lacked regulation at the time, so it was not illegal, and therefore owning it did not fit into any crime provided by law. That is why all the fortunate Bitcoins that had been seized by the FBI and which was possessed of the Silk Road when Ross got into prison has to be auctioned. The result is the same, my friends, that you are thinking: more free advertisement, while indirectly the operation ends up legitimizing Bitcoin as a currency. So, as you can see, thanks to the buzz caused by the FBI, the media, government, and financial institutions, the scenario was set for Bitcoin Center to begin operation soon. And where? Right there on Wall Street, a few yards from the world's largest stock exchange. It has the so-called white glove slap that the analysts like to call. Imagine banking institutions, everything they wanted to happen not only did materialize but had an inversely proportionate effect. But as we know, the banks would not give up so easily, trying to prevent modernity from reaching their sector. So, after another violent lobbying, when BIT license, as it was called, the regulation law, was completed in 2015, the virtual currency negotiation in that state was not feasible due to the fees and the certifications required of the sellers. So as you can see, the only way out was totally block access to residents in the state. But how do you block a currency access to the region that is often the center of world capital? Right? And now we ask ourselves, were the banks able to do so? Well, somehow I would say yes. Um, because that Bitcoin sales center 30 yards from the New York Stock Exchange and another, I think, 10-ish sales houses in the state were immediately closed as soon as the impositions came into force. But the most interesting of all is that the rules of the digital currency business in New York were created by the New York State Financial Services Department, which until then was headed by Benjamin Losky, the man who led the regulation process. Well, right after the regulation came into effect, what did Losky do? He resigned from his prestigious and well paid public office to create a consulting company for those who wanted to open a Bitcoin business and needed a little help skimming the loopholes of the laws created by himself. So, bear with me again. In other words, he saw the enormous potential of Bitcoin, built a wall around it, set at a gate, and began to charge the entrance of those who wanted to take advantage of his knowledge. So, I think that's pretty obvious and it gives us the big picture of the potential of this technology. And today, however, after struggling and losing all battles for the inventiveness and instant innovation of digital services, it seems that the scenario has changed, even for banks. The largest financial institution in the world already have a highly trained and well-paid manager to deal only with bitcoins, including JP Morgan, who has given a controversial and fully understandable, of course, statement, taking in consideration that he was losing more and more money every day thanks to digital novelty. But then, after the initial shock, not everything about Bitcoin it's a sea of regrets for banking. What excites him the most, and all of those who deal with large amount of money, and which can be used as something to add in business, is the blockchain validation chain. Some giants are already investing in their own versions of intelligence to validate derivative transfers, security transfers, or any other highly volatile financial instrument that requires a complex form of transfer. But of course, using their own machines and not those of anonymous miners. For banks, finding a way to control this validation system is perhaps more important than the very security of transactions. And I think this is the bet. For example, Blythe Masters, she is the CEO of Digital Asset Holdings, a company that develops technology for large financial deals. According to her, blockchain eliminates a significant amount of system inefficiency and reduces costs. The path is cleverly decided, at least to Blythe. If Bitcoin come around to skirting Wall Street, what you want to do is bring Wall Street closer to Bitcoin. And that is a very smart way to join this trend indeed. And about the initial investors of Bitcoin, those who helped to create the code and expand the industry, do they care? No, not at all, they say. Bitcoin is unmanageable. No matter who is trying to centralize and dominate it, it will not. The market itself will control it while keeping it free and decentralized. After so many comings and goings, Bitcoin is worth more than $7,000 and values more than any exit in the world in a matter of days or even hours. Okay, we can say that sometimes he even rocks, but he does not fall. It's like a stock market. Bitcoin's last big step was its debut on the New York Stock Exchange itself on Wall Street in December 2017. The Chicago Board Option Exchange was responsible for the launch of the funds. Not surprisingly, in a few hours of trading, the exit had already been valued at 25%, which of course triggered a 5 minute stop in the paper trade. And this is a measure that is taken whenever a stock falls too much or it rises so much that a chain reaction does not happen. Additionally, this launch also caused the company website to collapse due to an anticipated increase in traffic. The company itself made the announcement on its Twitter. Isn't this amazing? Imagine the boom this represents. This is incredible. After all this, there is still people asking, is it worth going for it? So according to analysts, Bitcoin still has a lot to grow, especially in countries such as ours, where banks charge exorbitant fees to move money that is already ours. Institutions charge a large slice of our money for doing nothing, just give a validation of the transaction, which BTC does not charge. So today Bitcoin is still in exploratory times and therefore its price is very fluctuating. But even if you perceived phenomena, if you see the gold price index in the time of great mining in the old West American, it's the same thing, it's the same logic. So although it plummets in one day, it soon rises again and gives a fabulous profit margin to those who bought down. So I would say Bitcoin is super attractive. Above all, for us who live in an economy not as strong, BTC is more resistant to foreign variations and government index, in addition to being more democratic. For example, unlike a traditional currency, which in most cases can only be divided by 100 parts. The example for €1, you can divide it in 100 cents. One Bitcoin can be divided into 10 million pieces. That is in practice a number without limits. But still then there is the Bitcoin criticism. When speaking of Bitcoin, there are two people's arguments against money who come out immediately. One is that it will be used for evil and that it does not exist, so it has no value at all. And as the first comment, I think it's necessary to rebuke. It is true that Bitcoin owes much of what is today due to the dark business that rolled on the Silk Road, but so what? The weapons and drugs that are sold nowadays are paid how? The problem is not the coin, it's the people behind it. It could happen with paper money as well. Do not let them make you believe that being anonymous is a bad thing. It's not. As for the second argument, think about these issues. What makes your €100 bill worth €100? It is certainly not their color or what is printed on it. Generally, a note is a piece of paper, right? So what guarantees the value of the paper? It is called ballast. Ballast is the guarantee of an economy. That is what guarantees that X billion euros in circulation in the country really worth X billion euros physically. Formally, it was measured by gold volume. What do a country possess? Today, it is calculated by the sum of all the states as reserves, oil, ores, etc. For example, forget the inflation issue and let's just assume that the country will print 100 million tomorrow to put on the street. If the country does not have something worth this 100 million to back up the printing of money, it will have no effect. It will be an empty paper, worthless. Now, after all this, what guarantees the value of our euro? It sounds like crazy talk, but it's just to say that all economies are based on a mutual sense of trust. So, therefore, Bitcoin at worst is on the same level as the euro. Confidence. We need to give our confidence to this technology and to this coin. And because confidence rolled out our today's segment, please be curious. Come and see what we do, what we represent. We are following a dream that can be yours too. So thank you for watching and see you soon.